Imagine a morning in early spring along the rugged coastline of northeastern Japan. The air carries the faint, briny scent of the Pacific, mingling with the earthy dampness of soil still heavy from winter rains. In a place like Rikuzentakata, or perhaps Minamisanriku, or one of the many small fishing hamlets etched into the cliffs, the horizon stretches endlessly, a seamless blend of sea and sky. But beneath this serene expanse lies a landscape forever altered. What was once a tidy grid of wooden homes, bustling markets, fragrant with fresh sashimi, and narrow streets alive with the chatter of neighbors, has been reshaped by the inexorable force of water. On March 11th, 2011, the Great East Japan earthquake unleashed a tsunami that surged up to 40 meters high, swallowing entire communities in a matter of minutes. Waves that traveled at the speed of a bullet train inundated over 500 square kilometers of coastal plain, leaving behind a mosaic of twisted metal, splintered timber, and silt-choked fields. In the years since, the waters have receded, but their imprint lingers. Salt-scarred earth, elevated scars of seawalls rising like silent guardians, and homes rebuilt not on the water's edge, but a careful distance away. Life here is a quiet negotiation with memory and motion, the relentless ebb and flow of tides that both sustain and threaten. This is the harshness of a flooded coastal town in the wake of catastrophe. Not the raw fury of the moment, but the enduring weight of absence and adaptation. Homes stand empty where families once gathered. Fishing boats bob in harbors deepened by debris. And the soil once fertile for rice and persimmons whispers of intrusion from the sea. Yet, amid this transformed terrain, something remarkable unfolds. How does life endure in such a place? How do the rhythms of daily existence, meals shared, children playing, elders recounting tales, reassert themselves against the pull of loss? In the following moments, we will gently trace the threads of challenge and resilience, uncovering the subtle ways in which this community, like the resilient pines that line the shore, bends but does not break. Let us begin with the immediate veil of uncertainty that settled over these towns like a persistent fog. In the hours and days following the tsunami, the world narrowed to essentials: survival, shelter, and the faint hope of reunion. Thousands sought refuge in makeshift evacuation centers, school gymnasiums with tatami mats laid side by side, where the air hummed with murmured prayers and the clink of shared rice bowls. Power flickered out across the region, plunging homes into shadow and halting the hum of refrigerators that preserved the day's catch. Water, that very element which had betrayed them, became scarce and suspect, drawn from emergency tanks under the watchful eye of volunteers. For weeks, families navigated these spaces with a quiet discipline, rationing batteries for radios that crackled with updates from distant Tokyo. Yet even as the waters withdrew, they left behind a landscape of subtle sabotage. Salt water, insidious and unyielding, seeped into the soil, turning paddies into barren crusts where rice shoots once pushed through mud with tender determination. Farmers in Iwate Prefecture, whose lives revolved around the seasonal cadence of planting and harvest, found their fields poisoned. A challenge that lingers to this day, demanding careful flushing with fresh water and the introduction of salt-tolerant crops like quinoa hybrids, tested in small plots. Navigation, too, became a daily puzzle. Roads buckled and bridges spanned voids where rivers had carved new paths, isolating hamlets that once traded gossip as easily as fish. Residents learned to read the land anew, tracing detours along elevated berms or ferrying supplies by boat through inlets widened by the surge. Deeper still lay the environmental echoes, where the sea's intrusion reshaped not just the earth, but the intricate web of life upon it. Coastal forests, those emerald belts of black pine that had buffered shores for centuries, were stripped bare, their roots exposed like fragile veins. In their absence, erosion quickened, and the dunes that cradled seabird nests shifted like restless dreams. Marine life, too, bore the scars. Oyster beds smothered under layers of silt, and schools of sardines scattered by the sudden churn of sediment. Yet in this disruption, nature revealed its quiet ingenuity. Underground springs, jolted awake by the quake, bubbled up in unexpected pools, creating refuges for stickleback fish and amphibians that adapted swiftly, their populations rebounding within months as new habitats formed from the chaos. For the human inhabitants, the challenges wove through body and spirit alike. Indoor spaces, once sanctuaries of warmth and routine, turned treacherous with mold blooming and walls saturated by floodwaters. In water-damaged homes of Miyagi Prefecture, families contended with damp air that carried the faint, musty tang of decay, breeding respiratory woes that whispered through the nights. The elderly, who comprised over half the tsunami's victims, faced amplified vulnerabilities, mobility hindered by debris-strewn paths, and the ache of isolation as younger kin relocated to safer grounds. Economically, the fishing fleets that defined these towns' heartbeat lay in ruins, nets tangled in wreckage and ports clogged with flotsam, forcing a pause in the age-old ritual of hauling lines at dawn. But it is in the adaptations, the gentle, persistent ways of mending, that the story of endurance truly unfolds. Consider the role of community, that unseen current stronger than any wave. In the evacuation centers, neighbors who had shared only nods over garden fences now wove bonds of necessity. Elders teaching card games to wide-eyed children, while young volunteers coordinated meal rotations, ensuring no bowl went empty. This mutual aid, rooted in Japan's cultural tapestry of enryo, quiet consideration for others, became the first line of defense, sustaining spirits when supplies thinned. As months turned to years, reconstruction emerged not as a thunderous reclaiming, but a measured dialogue with the land. The government, drawing lessons from the disaster's scale, championed multiple lines of defense. Towering seawalls, some rising 14 meters like stoic sentinels, now fringe the coast, their concrete forms softened by time and tide. Yet wiser voices called for harmony with nature. The Morino Buchote, or green tide embankment, where lower mounds of compacted disaster debris are cloaked in native shrubs and trees, offering both barrier and bloom. In Kesennuma, these living walls not only blunt future surges, but invite pollinators, their flowers a subtle nod to renewal. Further inland, the Millennium Hope Hills project transforms devastation into elevation. Engineered mounds, sculpted from non-toxic rubble and topped with saplings of pine and cherry, serve dual purpose: buffers against waves and serene parks threaded with raised evacuation paths. At Ainokama Park in Ishinomaki, visitors wander gravel trails lined with benches, pausing at memorials etched with names, a space for quiet reflection amid the rustle of leaves. These hills, planted with species whose roots delve deeper than 3 meters, have proven their mettle, withstanding test simulations of lesser swells while fostering habitats for deer and fox that venture from the hills at dusk. Human ingenuity mirrored this blend of strength and subtlety. Temporary housing, those modular prefabs clustered like patient villages, evolved into semi-permanent havens with communal baths and rooftop gardens, where residents cultivated herbs and pots salvaged from the tide. By 2015, over 230,000 displaced souls had begun returning, guided by soil remediation teams who sifted radiation-tainted earth in Fukushima's fringes, allowing cautious repopulation. Mental health, often the quietest casualty, found solace in group therapies disguised as tea circles, spaces where stories of loss were shared not in sobs, but in soft affirmations, fostering a collective healing that studies later confirmed. Proximity to the sea, far from hindering recovery, sometimes anchored it. In the fishing hamlets, adaptation took to the water. Debris, once a hazard, became resource. Concrete chunks sunk into bays like artificial reefs, spawning grounds for juvenile flounder and abalone that now thrive in Shizugawa's clearer depths. Fleets rebuilt with hybrid vessels, equipped with sonar for safer hauls and solar panels to power onboard freezers, ensuring the morning auction halls echo once more with bids on glistening mackerel. Agriculture, too, pivoted. Saltwater-flushed fields now yield salt-resistant varieties, and vertical farms in converted warehouses hum with LED lights, growing lettuces that crisp the air with freshness. Education wove through these efforts like a steady thread. School curricula, updated post-disaster, integrate tsunami drills, not as alarms, but as rhythmic exercises. Children mapping escape routes on classroom maps, learning the land's whispers before the seas roar. Community festivals, revived with lanterns floating on calm bays, honor the departed while celebrating the living, their lanterns a constellation against the night sky. Tourism, gently coaxed back, draws quiet seekers to museums in repurposed shipping containers, where artifacts from the flood, a child's shoe, a family photo frame, evoke not horror, but the profound fragility of place.
Even wildlife, that silent partner in this saga, adapted with unhurried grace. Mud snails, once decimated along Miyagi's shores, recolonized via drifting larvae from unaffected bays, their shells glinting anew in tidal pools. Stickleback fish, thriving in quake-borne springs, evolved subtle trait shifts, streamlined fins for navigating debris-laden currents, reminders that evolution is not grand drama, but incremental whisper. And in the forests, replanted pines stand taller, their canopies a dappled shelter for birds whose songs greet the dawn, unbroken. These 20 threads, from salted soils to sunken reefs, from mound parks to memory lanterns, interlace into a tapestry of persistence. Each one a small act, a farmer testing new seeds at twilight, a child tracing seawall shadows with chalk, an elder mending nets by lantern light. They speak to the art of living, not despite the flood, but in quiet conversation with it. As the sun dips toward the horizon in this reborn coastal town, casting long shadows across elevated homes and greening fields, we find ourselves drawn to a simple truth. Resilience is not the absence of hardship, but its gentle accompaniment. Here, where the sea both gives and takes with impartial rhythm, life endures through adaptation's patient hand. Communities that lean into one another, landscapes reshaped with foresight and care, and spirits that, like the tide itself, rise anew each day. In the flooded echoes of 2011, Japan has woven a legacy not of defiance but of harmony. Seawalls paired with whispering forests, grief tempered by shared stories, and futures built on the wisdom of what was lost. It invites us, in our own quiet corners of the world, to consider our own tides, those unseen currents of change, and how we too might bend toward them with grace. For in such places, life does not merely survive, it softly, steadfastly reimagines itself. As the waves continue their eternal murmur, may this tale offer a moment of calm reflection. Thank you for joining this gentle journey along Japan's resilient shore.